let's say you are God. Well, if you're watching this on a screen, you're probably not God. Unless you are, in which case, yo, what's up? Been trying to reach you. Please call me. For the rest of you, let's just say you are God, and that's God with a capital G. You're infinitely powerful, capable, wise, just, merciful, and so on and so forth. All your stats are maxed out at infinity. And for some reason, you feel so strongly about your godliness that you will endlessly torture anyone who does not recognize your existence. Now, unless your characteristics also include being infinitely Polish, you probably want to do an excellent job at proving your existence to everyone before subjecting them to your infinite pettiness, aka hell. My name is Apostate Aladdin, and you're watching one of the best ex-Muslim YouTube channels, so subscribe now if you haven't already. If you are God and you demand belief and worship and love and fear, how would you go about proving yourself? You could hold a meeting in the presence of all humans and tell them your demands clearly and directly. You could also show yourself to every person one-on-one and speak their language to avoid misunderstandings. Or you could secretly speak to a few special men and tell them to write books about it. And in these books, you could make a lot of unsubstantiated claims, unfulfilled promises, and foreboding threats. You could also make the readers paranoid about believing any of the other special men and their books, which you may or may not have had something to do with. I don't know why you'd want to go the book route, but hey, you're God, so do whatever you want. Just don't lash out on me when your plan doesn't work out. When I was a Sunni Muslim, I was taught that Allah, the one true God, is infinitely good, and that He did such an undeniably great job at proving His existence that anyone who disagrees is blatantly denying it, and therefore deserves His wrath. And the way Allah proves Himself is through, you guessed it, a book. Well, actually, a bunch of books that He allowed to be corrupted, but then He wrote a really, really good book. And that one is called the Quran. It is His final and most perfect revelation to all of humankind, despite only being written in Arabic. It is supposedly so perfect that the words in it are all the proof one needs to believe in Islam. But is that actually true? Is the Quran really all it's hyped up to be? That's a rhetorical question. Don't answer that. In my last video, I demonstrated how flawed the Quran is. I gave plenty of examples of verses that pose tremendously poor arguments. I also left you with some homework, specifically this verse, and I asked you to think about it before I give my commentary. Well, it's been long enough now, so pencils down everyone, class is in session, and if you sit through the first part of this video, you'll get to watch a fun little sketch. So let's get right to it. In verse 258 of Surat Al Baqara, Allah supposedly asks Prophet Muhammad, أَلَمْ تَرَ الَّذِي حَاجَّ إِبْرَاهِيمَ فِي رَبِّهِ أَنْ آتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْمُلْكَ. Don't worry, I won't only speak to you in a language you don't understand. Unlike the author of the Quran, I can read the room. Have you not seen the man who argued with Ibrahim about his Lord, because Allah gave him kingdom? Since Muhammad didn't live at the same time as Ibrahim, I'll take this to be a rhetorical question. The author is setting up a story about an arrogant king who felt emboldened by his kingship to challenge Ibrahim. The verse continues, إِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ رَبِّ الَّذِي يُحْيِي وَيُمِيتُ قَالَ أَنَا أُحْيِي وَأُمِيتُ. Ibrahim says, My Lord giveth life and causeth death. And the man responds, I giveth life and causeth death. قال إبراهيم فإن الله يأتي بالشمس من المشرق فأتي بها من المغرب. So Ibrahim says, Allah causes the sun to rise up in the east, so how about you cause it to come up from the west? And according to the verse, the disbeliever was utterly defeated, and Allah does not guide the wrongdoers. And everybody clapped. Not only does Allah not guide the wrongdoers, He supposedly misleads them further. I spoke about that in a previous video, which you should definitely watch next. Since the Quran is Islam's primary way of making its case, I have no choice but to treat this verse as arguments Allah made against the skepticism of disbelievers. And if you look closely, you'll notice that the most obvious flaw in these arguments is that they're not arguments at all. These are claims on top of claims. Ibrahim claims that his God is the beginner and ender of life. He claims that his God controls the sun. And he claims that the disbeliever in the story was stumped by such incredible arguments. As you can see from the runtime of this video, I am far from stumped, but we'll get back to the arguments in a moment. From the verse alone, we have no idea who this man is, and we don't know what he meant when he claimed to also giveth life and causeth death. So that's another criticism of the Quran. On its own, it is often lacking in context and not always clear about what it means. And mind you, this is not a language barrier for me. I speak Arabic and there isn't a single word in this verse that I don't understand. And the verses before and after it are unrelated to the story. So what am I missing? How can I begin to figure out who and what the author meant? This is going to be a bit of a tangent, but bear with me. A lot of the Quran cannot be understood even by Arabic speakers without reading the tafsir or exegesis, which are the works of Islamic scholars hundreds of years after the death of Muhammad. In those writings, they rely heavily on narrations of hadiths, which are supposedly quotes from and about Muhammad, compiled hundreds of years after his death. They use those narrations to fill in the missing context and try to explain what the verses of the Quran mean. There's more to it, but the point is that even if the Quran was somehow word for word what Muhammad claimed Allah said, the Quran is a collection of disjointed stories that are largely indecipherable without lots of lore compiled through hundreds of years of he said, she said. Going back to the verse, if we consult the tafsir by At-Tabari or Ibn Kathir, for example, we'll find interpretations claiming that the king killed a man on death row and let another live. That's what he meant by I give life and cause death. We'll also find a lot of opinions identifying the king as a Namrud, with one opinion claiming that he had a temple in Babylon, another claiming that a Namrud ruled for 400 years, which, by the way, Muslims are supposed to believe that humans used to be as tall as 90 feet and they lived for centuries, like how Noah preached for 900 years. We have since discovered fossils of everything from dinosaurs to crustaceans, but never of giant humanoid creatures for some reason. And as far as I can tell, there is no evidence of a king named Nimrod or a Namrud actually existing outside of Christian and Islamic mythology, let alone that he lived and ruled for 400 years. Given the fantastical nature of these tales, do you think that this verse is a retelling of events that actually happened, or is it a parable? If it is a parable, then it doesn't really matter who the man is. It is a fictional story meant to illustrate a lesson or a wisdom. Yet most Muslims take such stories to be literal accounts of real events. This makes it very hard for me to believe Islam's claims, because the decipherers of God's words believe myths and legends as if they were historical accounts. It's not very confidence-inspiring when the scholars of Islam and possibly Muhammad himself are confusing fiction with history. God tip number 1. If you're God and you're proving yourself through a book, I suggest that you don't make it suspiciously at odds with the observable reality. But what if we treat this verse as a parable? What could be the intended lesson? If the author meant to convey that it is mainly arrogance which leads people to argue back or disbelieve, then the author is being disingenuous. Even those who started off as the most humble and pious believers can question and realize that their religion fails to prove its claims. Either way, the onus is on the claim maker to show proof, regardless of who is asking for it or how arrogant they may or may not be. If you ask me, the king is set up to be a villain so that the reader would automatically side with the good guy, Ibrahim, because only an idiot would think that some long-dead man could be a god. And you're not an idiot now, are you? So by having the king claim to emulate God, Ibrahim wins by default. If the author is using this fictional debate as a memorable way to express an argument, I'd expect him to address the best version of that argument, like a regular person asking a prophet for proof that he speaks for God. How would he respond then? Look at the sunrise, therefore Allah? Obviously, that's not good enough, unless you distract the reader with a bit of character assassination. And you can't just point to something that already happens and give your God credit for it. Even if we meet the prophet halfway and concede that God is a necessary concept, he didn't demonstrate any connection to that entity. God tip number 2. Avoid relying on dirty tactics to win imaginary debates. It makes you look sleazy and desperate, not to mention fictional. Steelman opposing arguments, don't strawman them. Man, I really should be charging consulting fees for this advice. God, if you're listening, links are in the description. Buy me a coffee or something. Another problem with this scenario is that in the Islamic view of reality, magic and jinn and sorcerers are supposedly real. So how can an observer tell the difference between all that stuff and a divine miracle? Because a miracle seems to mean anything that is not well understood and is therefore attributed to a supernatural cause, specifically your god of choice. So had a sorcerer made it seem to Ibrahim like the sun rose from the west, would that be good enough? Or if a man claimed to know God and used jinn to make things levitate, would that make him credible enough to be a prophet? Tip number 3, if you use miracles to boost your special men's credibility, make sure they cannot be imitated or faked, because it's hard to tell grifters apart from prophets. And while you're at it, maybe don't make it a habit to capitalize on ignorance and gaps in people's knowledge. The God of the gaps is not a good look for you. If I approach an uncontacted tribe while wearing a jetpack, they probably wouldn't be able to explain how I'm flying. So does that give me enough credibility to claim anything I want about God? So you know what? I'd say don't use miracles at all because they're inherently non sequitur in their nature. Unexplainable things do not reliably point to God. What is really odd is that merely one verse later, in verse 260, Ibrahim asks Allah to show him how he reanimates the dead, despite Ibrahim already arguing with a full chest that Allah has the power to do that. Despite Ibrahim speaking to Allah and surviving being thrown into a fire because of divine intervention, he still needed a demonstration of Allah's powers in order for his heart to be at ease. So Allah instructs Ibrahim to chop up 4 birds, marinate them, barbecue them, invite some friends over with a couple of beers, and just chill out, man. I'm just kidding. So Allah instructs Ibrahim to scatter the bird parts over several mountains and then call for them to return. And the implication is that Ibrahim did so and it worked. What I'm struggling to understand is what is the point of this verse? If it is to show that even prophets who speak to Allah have doubts, then shouldn't Allah demonstrate his powers to every single person who has doubts, especially the ones who God remains hidden from? Tip number 4, be consistent. If you'll prove your abilities to one guy, you should prove them to everyone. If the point of this verse is to demonstrate that Allah is capable of reanimating the dead, then the author fails miserably, because the verse doesn't prove or demonstrate that at all. It's just another claim and another story. Tip number 5. Reading words about miracles is not as impressive as witnessing miracles. So consider demonstrating your abilities constantly instead of relying on people believing that it happened once before. Also, wait a minute. Every human today is expected to believe in Islam just by reading the Quran, because the Quran is supposedly sufficient proof. So when Ibrahim wanted his heart to be at ease, why didn't Allah just throw a copy of the Quran in his lap and tell him to prove his little heart out? Perhaps it's because Ibrahim didn't speak Arabic? Still, Allah could have given him a translation, but as every bookworm will tell you, those rarely do the original justice. Or perhaps it's because the tafsir weren't yet written, so the Quran wouldn't have made much sense to Ibrahim, even if he did understand Arabic. Whatever the reason was, Allah didn't use the Quran to reassure Ibrahim. He supposedly used a miracle. Tip number 6. Again, be consistent. If you claim your book is proof, then put your money where your mouth is. Use your book as proof instead of relying on one-off gimmicks. Speaking of gimmicks, you might be wondering how Ibrahim's debate would have gone if instead of a king with a god complex, he argued with a reasonable skeptic. Well, there's no need to wonder anymore because I have been divinely inspired to know how that would go. And it would go something like this.
As I was saying, I think you should follow me because I preach for the one true God.
I'm not yet convinced, to be honest. How exactly do I know that's true?
It's quite simple, really. My God brings life and ends it. Can you do that?
What? No, I'm not saying I can do that. I'm saying that...
Aha, so you do concede that Allah is the one true God.
No, I don't, and you're going about this all wrong. But, okay, I'll bite. I grow tomatoes in my garden. I bring them to life from little seeds, and I harvest them when they're ripe. That's me bringing life and ending.
No, that's not what I mean. Anyone can water a seed. I mean creating life from scratch, from inorganic substances. Like Allah created everything from clay.
Well, scientists are making progress in creating the building blocks of life in a lab. If they succeed, would that make them gods?
No, that's not what I'm talking about either. My God created the most complex and intelligent life forms you can think of.
You mean, like, humans?
Yes, exactly. You can't create a human being.
Well, give me 9 months and a willing participant, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, very clever, but you know what I mean. My God is behind the mechanisms that allow any of that to happen. He allows the plant to grow. He decides on whether or not a woman gets pregnant.
Okay, then. Prove it.
Prove what?
Prove that your God is behind all of that. I don't want claims. I want proof.
Can you stop using the P word? How about you use the F word instead?
I beg your pardon?
Faith. You need faith.
There we go with the faith.
That's the whole point. You get rewarded for having faith.
Faith is not a substitute for proof. If I make claims about my hypothetical God and demand you have faith, you wouldn't think that's good enough.
That's not the same thing. My God is real, not hypothetical. I can't have faith in a hypothetical.
Why don't you just admit that you have no proof? I mean, do you really expect me to take your word as gospel?
Well, as Quran, but no, actually, you know what? I do have proof. Are you going to listen, or are you just going to be stubborn about it?
Please, go ahead. I'm all ears.
Okay, how about this? You skeptics love science so much, so let's do an experiment. My God makes the sun rise from the east. can your so-called God make it rise from the west? If that happens, I'll join your religion right now.
That's not the scientific method, and you know it.
No, I don't know it.
Yeah, actually, probably you don't. Anyway, that's not how it works. The Earth's rotation is why the sun seems to rise from the east. You're asking if my God can reverse the direction of the Earth's rotation.
Don't change the subject. Can your God make the sun rise from the west? Yes or no?
You can't just impose a challenge on my God if you won't do the same to yours.
So he can't.
Make Allah bring the sun from the west, and I'll join Islam right now. I'm ready to say the Shahada. I just need proof. Ask Allah to take the challenge.
How arrogant of you to expect Allah to do things to prove himself to you. You kuffar are truly something else. What a Nimrod.
Hey, I'm just doing what you're doing. Is that really all it takes to stump you?
Allah said that people like you would be so arrogant. You're not even taking this seriously.
I'm taking it as seriously as you are. What I'm doing here is highlighting your flawed epistemology. I can easily claim that my God makes the sun rise from the east.
But you don't actually believe that. Your God is so hypothetical he doesn't even have a name.
Okay, let's call it Al Newton. Lord Al Newton also causes gravity. It makes things fall down towards the earth. Can Allah make things fall up towards the sky?
Okay, I get it. You're just being difficult.
No, I'm not. I'm just trying to get you to be consistent.
Okay, you know what? Just forget about the sun. How about this? Just look around you. Everything you see...
I know where this is going, so let me get ahead of you. The trees and the sky and the stars and everything you see around you are creations of Al Newton.
That's what I was gonna...
Your existence is proof of Al Newton.
How did you...
And if you don't believe in Al Newton and become a Newtonian, you're going to hell forever. Do you really want to take that chance?
How are you doing this? Are you reading my mind?
No, I'm just showing you how a lot of theists make the same claims for their gods. And without proof, you're all at a stalemate. So how do you propose we know which claim is true?
We could play rock, paper, scissors.
Seriously. Okay. Yeah, sure. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
Best 2 out of 3?
I can't do this anymore. It was nice talking to you, but I'm out.
I really like the skeptic's pitch for God. I'm sure he'd make an excellent prophet if only he had a bit more gravitas. I hope that drew a laugh out of you. Okay, now I'm just forcing it. Seriously though, if this video made you smile, laugh, or think at any point, then you owe me a like and a comment. And I don't make the rules, Al Newton does, and he is definitely real. See? So if you're God, I hope that you learn from Allah's mistakes, and I hope that you incorporate my tips into your divine revelation. But that's enough from me. I would love to hear from you. If you're God, how would you go about proving your religion? Please let me know in the comments below. And jokes aside, I want you to remember that what wasn't proven does not need to be disproven, but it can still be illuminating and maybe even cathartic to look at these claims with a critical lens. Thanks to Drew for voicing the skeptic in the sketch. I had a lot of fun recording it. And if you don't already follow Genetically Modified Skeptic, what are you doing? Go subscribe right now. And a special thanks to my supporters and donors on Patreon, YouTube, and elsewhere. And thanks to the Discord server members who helped me brainstorm for this video. I could not do what I do without your support, because it really does take a village. So if you'd like to contribute, the links are in the description below. And as always, think critically and think for yourself. And consider watching one of these videos next, whichever one you gravitate towards.
Rock,
paper,
scissors.
I think the delay makes it to where we can't. Okay, I'll say it and you can say it, and then we'll edit it together. I'll go.